Yeah, thanks for inviting me over to Warsaw to this interesting conference. I'm giving you some more insights about something which Julia's already referred to, which is the exclusive right in press publications, the so-called ancillary copyright for press publishers or neighboring right for press publishers. There are different terms around. They are all more or less synonymous, despite people try to tell you that, for example, the European approach would be a totally different story than the German or the Spanish approach. It's all the same. And this is the plan. What they are trying to do in the DSM Directive Article 11 is to implement a new rights, a new intellectual property rights, an exclusive right for press publishers in their publications. This would be an additional right to the already very broad existing copyright law in texts, articles, images, and all these things. And more or less, it puts something on top of copyright law, which is the protection of very, very small excerpts, especially of texts, or maybe even thumbnails like small images. This is something which is left out by the copyright protection at the moment, and this is the guarantee for free communication on the internet. For example, it's the guarantee for free linking, hyperlinking on the internet, because if everything is protected, you cannot say what's already published anymore without getting a license from somebody. It is a right which is different from the German and the Spanish approach. You might have heard of it some years ago in Germany. They implemented such an ancillary right for press publishers. And both these rights, national rights, have a lot of safeguards implemented, which are especially addressing the question, who could be the user or who is affected by the new right. In Germany, it's only addressed to search engines and news aggregators, and in Spain, it's only addressed to news aggregators at all. The European approach doesn't have these safeguards, which makes it even more dangerous, because it says everybody who wants to use a part or the whole publication has to get a license for this kind of use. It's not restricted to search engines. It's not restricted even to commercial uses or something like that. So everybody of you is inside this law, is in the scope of the law. Everybody has to deal in the future with this law if it's implemented on the European agenda. And one more thing which is different to the national approaches is it has a very long term of protection. The German law lasts for 1 year only, and the European law shall last for 20 years. So every publication, which is let's say online publications, are protected for another 20 years and retroactively for the last 20 years. So publications or parts of publications which were in the public domain before will be protected by this new monopoly. So this sounds insane, I know. The question is, what's the plan behind it? So when you ask the commission, for example, or the publishers' lobbyists, which is more or less the same, the answer is more or less the same, then they will tell you, oh, it's just natural. Publishers, press publishers especially, have to compete on the internet markets with other let's say media conglomerates and everything, so they have to fight against piracy, so they need their own right, and there are a lot of other publishers like music publishers or film publishers who have already these rights, so it's no problem. And then there's this plot which is quite the contrary to what Julia said before. We need a publisher right to fight against fake news. And there's one more, we need a publisher's right to let's say, keep and establish quality journalism in Europe, which is both total bullshit, because there is no lack of rights for press publishers nowadays. We have the copyright, which is extremely broad. The only thing that is not in the copyright, and which is the hidden agenda, depending on whom you ask, it's a not outspoken aspect that one thing is followed here, which is there are large media conglomerates, very powerful publishers like Springer Verlag in Germany, or Le Monde, or other big houses, publishing houses, who just want to have money from Google and from Facebook. And to get money from Google and Facebook by implementing new intellectual property right, there's only one way. What Google does, for example, in the search engine is they display the small snippets, which are the small excerpts of the source which they are referring to per hyperlink. They don't use whole texts or something like that, or whole articles, images, and all these things. They just use these small snippets. So for the press publishers, there is only one way to get money from these big media companies, the internet companies, which is protecting the snippets on top of the copyright law which already exists. So what's the problem then? The problem is that especially policymakers think that they make laws against Google, against Facebook, that they make laws which can funnel some kind of, turnover and income from big internet companies to big media companies. That might be the idea. But it turned out totally wrong at those national experiences, tests, if you like. The situation turned out that Google especially got a gratuitous license for the snippeting, for hinting on the publications of the publishers, so they gave the rights away for free, and there were many other companies, smaller companies, especially in the search and aggregating area, which were not given these licenses, and they had the problem that they were torn or dragged into lawsuits and all these things. So the story is, and the empirical evidence that we have from these examples is that the big companies will go out better than before, and the small companies will have a problem. And this it will lead to nothing, because the big companies, they simply won't pay. Who will pay are the smaller companies, are the startups. Just imagine you implement such a law which says everybody who uses whatever tiny part of any publication whatsoever has to get a license for this kind of use, and you go with your startup idea, you are a search professional, for example, you go in Poland, you go to an investor and say, well, I have this great idea, give me €1 million to make it real. And they say, what about this publisher's right? And you say, well, I have no idea, actually. I don't know what it's all about, and I don't know what it turns out, because the earliest time that I can expect to solve that all problems are solved is like 15 years ahead, when the European Court of Justice decided what kind of snippets are protected and what are not. So the smaller companies, they will suffer, and this is true also for the smaller publishers, like we also saw in these national national experiences, like in Spain and in Germany. Smaller publications are very reliant on the search engines and the news aggregators to funnel users to their websites. As we all know, the whole media economy, the internet economy, relies on visibility and relies on visits of users, because the business model is in advertising. And if the search engines don't link to your website anymore because you're stuck in lawsuits over the question whether you need a license for that or not, then you are less visible. And this is true for everybody who publishes online, like journalists, like smaller publications, and so on. And finally, there are the users. Imagine you use the internet and you publish things, you share things on Facebook and everything like that. You never know whether you share something which is already protected by this publisher's right. If you have a blog, you never know whether this or that wording was already used by somebody else, by a publisher, and is therefore monopolized for the next 20 years, like simple headlines and stuff like that. And even if you link to something and the hyperlink contains the headline of the article that you link to, it might be an infringement of this new publisher's right. So, to put it simple, there's only one way to put it: don't touch the right to link, or you kill the internet. Thanks a lot.